President Trump has now emerged from Air Force One. We think that Vladimir Putin might emerge at roughly the same time. So we'll watch them as they take the steps to meet. But please do go on, Ambassador Pfeiffer.
Yeah. If he can bring Putin to agree to a trilateral meeting that includes Ukrainian President Zelensky, that would be a big win. If he can get Putin to agree to an unconditional general ceasefire, that would be a win. But beyond that, I think Ukrainians would be nervous if President Trump gets into things like talking about land swaps. And now, the good news was on the flight out to Anchorage, the president said he would not negotiate on behalf of Ukraine. But a week ago, he was talking about land swaps. So which Donald Trump is now walking towards this meeting with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is going to be trying to get President Trump to engage on things like land swaps and details, because Trump believes that he can spin Putin believes that he can spin Trump and get the American president perhaps to begin to align more closely with Russian positions for calling for an end to the war. President Trump has to avoid that. We'll see if he has the discipline to do that in the next couple of hours.
Alexander Vindman, the men that will be in the meeting are not the economic advisors, but they are the more strategic advisors, the security advisors. We've already reported that Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, will be with Donald Trump, along with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. We've also just learned that there will be a couple of others as well with Vladimir Putin, including Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, and his foreign policy advisor, Yuri Ushakov. What does it mean to you that the men that will be involved in this first meeting do not include the economic advisors?
Well, first, I'll tell you, I'm absorbed by this visual of the red carpet being rolled up for Vladimir Putin. And in 123 other countries, signatories of the International Criminal Court Convention, this man would be arrested as soon as he lands. Here, he's being welcomed for a conversation. So the expectations are pretty high for that gift ready to Vladimir Putin. I think the participation of not a one-on-one now, but a kind of multilateral between the security chiefs indicates that Donald Trump really wants to see if there's anything to be had on this critical topic of a Ukraine peace deal before a broader conversation occurs, before a conversation occurs on economic issues. Maybe there's some tangential issues, maybe some arms control could be discussed. But by and large, this is a conversation about Ukraine, seeing if there's anything to be had there. Maybe this conversation doesn't go forward if there's not some sort of ground to close there.
So after a stern walk up to the red carpet with Donald Trump scowling, quite a warm greeting between the two men, big smiles, a hearty handshake. And they're now watching I believe about to watch a military flyover. I'm just going to pause for a second and go into this, see if we can hear anything out there in Anchorage.
President Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire?
Mr. President, what's your message to Vladimir Putin?
Mr. Putin, did you underestimate Ukraine? President Putin, will you stop killing civilians? President Putin, how can the U.S. trust your words?
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go. Let's go around there. Come on, guys. Stop.
All right, they are both getting into the beast, it appears. So they're going to be riding together to their meeting. It is unclear if Vladimir Putin or President Trump could hear the questions that were shouted out. But one reporter did ask Vladimir Putin if he would stop killing civilians. And at that moment, you saw him kind of shrug. Again, we don't know if he heard the question, but boy, what timing, considering that just last night there was a deadly strike in Ukraine. I believe it killed and injured 17 civilians, if I have my numbers correct. So that killing is still happening. Donald Trump keeps talking about wanting to end the killing, that he claims it's first and foremost for him. But again, he's welcoming Vladimir Putin to the United States. I know the U.S. is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court, but he has been indicted by the ICE. This is not a man that would be welcomed pretty much anywhere else in the Western world.
Correct. And, I've organized these meetings before when I worked for President Obama. This is extraordinary that any president or prime minister gets into the president's car.
Yeah, I was going to say, has anyone gotten into the beast before?
There was one time President Medvedev went and got hamburgers with Barack Obama in 2010. I remember that. But this is very, very rare for any leader, any allied leader, any democratically elected leader, let alone this imperial.
This is a former KGB leader.
And worse, it's worse. He's the first guy since Hitler to launch a full-scale invasion and occupation in Europe. That is the person who has been greeted this way, that the president just clapped as he walked up. And I want to be clear. I support President Trump in trying to end this war. Lots of my Ukrainian friends applaud him, too. I support even engagement with President Putin, even though that's controversial.
And look at that image. Vladimir Putin smiling ear to ear, looking almost giddy inside the presidential limousine.
But I don't support that, just to be clear. This is beyond the call of duty. And I think it raises the stakes for Trump. If he's doing all this, he better get something more than just a future meeting.
I mean, it looks like he's treating him in a friendlier tone than he treats most of our allies.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. I mean, those images of him just standing there waiting and then clapping even before Putin had come up to him, and then the hearty handshake. I think the world has just seen two Americas right now. One America that welcomed a war criminal, and another America that has a free press in which journalists stand there and get to ask questions that Putin never hears anywhere else he goes.
That is such a good point. Monica Alba, speaking of a member of the Free Press, Monica Alba, what do you have for us?
Yeah, it just really struck me there, Katie, the fact that the two of them are riding in the presidential limousine in the Beast together. And essentially, they are having that one-on-one FaceTime that the White House had said there would be some component of, but then they said the actual meeting would be more of a 3-on-3 with those interpreters. But this is clearly a moment where the two of them are enjoying that time alone together. And as you said, it did appear to be quite warm, quite friendly, some smiles. I think you're right to point out some of those questions that President Putin and President Trump that were just posed to them. They included, will you agree to a ceasefire? Mr. President, what is your message to Vladimir Putin? Mr. Putin, did you underestimate Ukraine? Mr. Putin, will you stop killing civilians? And President Putin, how can the U.S. trust your word? So I agree with you. It may have been a little bit hard to hear all of those questions from the platform that Presidents Trump and Putin were standing on as they were taking photographs there. But the journalists were fairly close. And I do think that some of that at least got through. And it is a striking moment to point out that President Putin isn't typically faced with those kinds of questions. And so if there is a joint press conference here later today, again, that is dependent on how these talks go, according to the U.S. side. Those are the kinds of questions that President Putin will be faced with and will have to answer for, as well as President Trump is also met, of course, with many similar questions. And for him to explain why he feels he can trust Vladimir Putin in this moment and whatever he says to him today over the course of these talks, Katie.
Vladimir Putin not just smiling, not just giving a hearty handshake, but laughing as he entered the Beast, and within the Beast as well, alone with the President of the United States. Ambassador Pfeiffer, I want to go off something that Ambassador McFaul said a moment ago, that he is all for President Trump working toward a ceasefire, and he hopes he does. Is there a good reading of this? Can you say that this is something that, while ugly and maybe distasteful, needs to get done because the phone calls weren't working? Does Vladimir Putin need to be flattered in this way? Do you need to roll out the red carpet for him in order for him to stop killing civilians?
Look, if President Trump succeeds in getting Putin to agree to a general unconditional ceasefire, he does deserve credit. But I think that's going to be a hard discussion. A week and a half ago, apparently, just for a partial ceasefire Russia was demanding or was telling Stephen Witkoff, Ambassador Trump's negotiator, that Ukraine would have to be beginning to cede territories, would have to pay a price just for a partial ceasefire. So if you can get a ceasefire, that would be a victory. But based on what the Russians are doing, they continue to press the battle both on the front lines. They continue to send rockets and drones to pound Ukrainian cities. There's been no sign that the Russians are prepared to ease up on the battle. And if you look at what the Russians say publicly, there's been no indication of any softening in Russian demands, which have only hardened since 2022.
Yeah, you can see him laughing right there, by the way. Go ahead.
Exactly. This could be a very tough conversation if President Trump wants to push it. The question, though, is I think Putin is going to be trying to turn him towards other things and trying to get him involved in things like, well, let's talk about territory. And to the extent that President Trump lets himself get pulled into that trap, he gets into, I think, very risky territory.